Hey guys, as some of you may or may not know, I have some experience as a repair technician for electronics. That being said, I recently broke the front screen on my iPhone 8 Plus, so I figured I'd go ahead and film a little tutorial here on how to change an LCD and battery while we're at it on an iPhone 8 Plus. Now, I'm really happy with this phone, but in all honesty, the only reason why I'm really bothering to make this particular screen change is because I need it in good working condition in order to trade this phone in to get the new iPhone SE, whether I actually trade it in or sell it to someone, considering it's still in good condition other than a cracked screen. The battery has degraded. It's below 78% of its maximum capacity, which means that it will actually throttle the operating system just like any other iPhone would in its same situation in order to allow it to function, which has just been real annoying and aggravating. So we're changing that battery out while we're in there, since we're gonna have to open her up anyways. Some of the things we're gonna be using to make this happen is this dripping Surette here. It's filled with 91% isopropyl alcohol, which is available anywhere. It's basically rubbing alcohol that you would put on a wound or whatever. 91% or higher I recommend. Honestly, if you can order online 99% or whatever ridiculous percentage you can get up to, by all means do it. It's just meant to neutralize the effectiveness of the adhesives that we're going to be encountering in, and I like to cheat with it, honestly, because as long as you let it dry, there is basically no risk to using rubbing alcohol. You just obviously don't take a bath in ISO with your phone, but as long as you're letting it dry, you could use a whole lot of it. Also, I have compressed air. Doesn't really matter what kind. This is just to clean debris out, which is something that not a lot of people realize. But these phones, though they are sealed with an adhesive and some screws, they do get some debris inside. So it's good to go ahead and do a cleaning, and I like to take care of that while I'm inside the device. I have a grounding wristband because, believe it or not, if you've ever seen anybody wear socks on carpet and walk up and shock somebody for some laughs, it's fun, but not to electronics. That will basically permanently kill it. So I have it on an anti-static mat. You can look up anti-static mat on Amazon or your shopping provider of choice and find one similar to the one I'm using today. I'm simply clipping this wristband to it so that I stay grounded and I don't build up that shock, whether it's the material I'm wearing or the surface I may be standing on. In this case, it's vinyl flooring, so I don't necessarily know that it would be an issue, especially because I'm not really moving around physically during this, just the good old upper body. Aside from that, I have an iFixit kit, and some of the things you're going to be seeing me use today are a suction cup, which can be found pretty much anywhere. This is all part of the iFixit, I believe it's the Pro Kit, which runs anywhere from $50 to $80, just depending on what they're feeling like charging that day on iFixit.com. I've seen the price fluctuate, is why I say it. This is a spudger. Well, not a spudger. This is actually an opener. So it's actually printed on the inside here. This tool is designed to break before your device does. Don't trust that. A ginger touch is always much better, but it does come in handy for disconnecting a lot of the hardware connections. Another thing you're going to see me using, not necessarily for its intended purpose, but for my own personal purpose, is these tweezers here. I use them really to scrape the old adhesive with isopropyl alcohol in conjunction with Q-tips and compressed air to get a nice good clean, because if you want to do the job right, this outer edge adhesive, which I'm actually going to go ahead and skip ahead and show you now, it's part of what secures the phone down, but it's also part of what keeps debris out. And if you do your job right, you may or may not save this phone from a splash in water. I say that because there's actually a gasket, which in my phone is gone. It fell out today, ironically enough, underneath this home button that keeps water out. The earpiece as well, if you get a well enough designed screen, may keep liquid out, but it's all based on quality. And then the last line of defense is actually the edges where it sits on the frame as well, and the adhesive helps mitigate that, along with, of course, the screws. Now, I've kind of just jerry-rigged this whole thing to make this video happen, on my hydro flask to make it work, but we're gonna go ahead and give you guys some free knowledge. If you have a device, a Plus model iPhone, aside from differences maybe with the 6S and 6 Plus with how they open, it is pretty much across the board the same. For your reference, if my fingernails were the charge port bottom side of the phone, so basically opposite to how it's oriented right now, a 6S would open more like, you know, like snapping like you're doing like, like a crocodile style motion, versus the 7s and 8 Plus is opening book style, which you'll see when we get into it later on. That being said, in this kit, you'll also see me using one of 2 bits. We have a size 000 Phillips head, which probably can't make out the finer details of, which is understandable. It's incredibly small, but it's just a standard Phillips screwdriver. I'll show you a bigger one for reference here. It's just size 000, where this is a size 1. You're also going to need a Y head screwdriver tip. So whether you have them on a fixed one or not, completely up to you. Here's a larger size one just for some reference there. It looks kind of like the Phillips, but it's actually just got the 3 sides to it, which I can't focus on very well. Sorry about that. And you're also going to see me using those tips on this bit right here. I can switch out the heads and it flows freely, lets me flow a little easier. You will also see me using a spudger. There are 2 different spudgers in my particular kit. Or a guitar pick. I use these for a variety of reasons. I use them often in conjunction when there's adhesive involved with isopropyl alcohol to get the desired result, but basically I'm trying to minimize using my fingers and using these objects because I got big fat guy fingers, and I'm not trying to put my oils or anything like that inside the device as much as I can minimize it, which is key. You want to keep electrostatic, you want to keep moisture, you want to keep dust, especially too, free from your device while you have it open. So with that, we have our parts. I used Injured Gadgets. I have a screen protector here because I didn't have one on here, and honestly it could have very well have saved the phone. It's placed awkwardly. It was a corner strike right above where my finger's at. You can't quite tell with the lighting, but it could have been different. So there's that screen protector, kind of ride things the next way around. Here's the battery replacement, which I haven't opened up yet, but there's a battery in there, also from Injured Gadgets. And an adhesive, which we'll get into because the batteries are actually their own headache in and of themselves. And lastly, we have the actual screen, our reason for this video. I purchased the in-cell screen. To give you guys kind of like a layman's term, really, there's a lot of screen technology out there. This is advertised as an advanced aftermarket LCD, so it's going to be pretty much matching OEM specs, but that's essentially what everybody claims at the end of the day, but it's all aftermarket parts. This particular screen is in-cell, which, you know, it's stated twice, so it's supposedly a big deal. But the reality of it is it's a type of technology. So when you touch your phone, there's what's called a digitizer that reads all of those touch components. When you're looking aftermarket, if you can trust your branding, and I do particularly trust Injured Gadgets, I've gotten parts through them in the past, and I've been happy with that. Actually, it looks like they already gave me an adhesive with it, so I bought an extra one, which is fine because, honestly, for a lot of technicians, surprisingly, applying the adhesive was the most difficult for them, which was completely odd. In my opinion, I found it was mostly just because they didn't clean the frame for the excess residue that was there previously. And a lot of people will tell you, don't even change it in the first place. Don't listen to those people, especially if it's your device. Take pride in your work, and it's worth it. I know because I've repaired several phones within my family, this phone included, which have taken actual dives in water. This was submerged in a bathtub for 30 seconds before I inherited it. My sister claimed that it did not work. I took one look at it, opened it up, didn't see any oxidation or any signs of severe water damage. Knew it was good to go, took the risk, changed components out. Usually if it's really severely water damaged for some reason, changing a component will cause some kind of weird short and just kill the device a lot of the time if you don't do like a ultrasonic cleaning, which I was not about to get into for this phone. But still, going back to what I derailed myself for, in-cell screens. So aftermarket screens are actually on sale, which means that when they build it, the display that actually shows everything, this unseen black part here through the glass of the actual screen, the display is actually woven with the digitizer not attached to it. That is to say, the digitizer in the glass panel that sits on top of this display, which you can't tell because you're looking at the smudges on the glass, which I'm actually referencing. This glass is actually an on-cell right here, if I remember correctly. So the digitizer and glass panel are integrated and then attached to the display, versus with in-cell, which is what actual iPhones, when they're OEM parts, use. They take the digitizer and the display and fuse those two and then adhere the glass onto it. Now, I will say this, if you're looking for overall quality parts, one clear detail to look for if you have a description from your distributor is the press of the screen. It's how they apply the adhesive to cure it to this display and digitizer. You're looking ideally for a cold press. Cold press, it's longer, it's at the end of the day more costly for your distributor, but it's more resilient. You find a lot of what's called hot press screens, which are the cheaper ones in circulation. They will actually come apart. There's actually, so if we're being very, very literal, there's actually several components to the screen's layers. There's the glass, the digitizer and LCD, sure, but in between there's actually a plastic frame that some of the glass is sitting on, and it's compressed down and pressed to. And if you have a very shoddy made part, you'll notice the separation. Also, if you beat the crap out of this phone and it's an aftermarket screen, I mean, eventually you probably will see something. But usually, if you haven't been too rough on the phone and it's separating, it's usually because you have a cheap hot press. That being said, we're gonna go and get started. I've already powered the phone off. Technically, I guess the phone could be powered on, but if you're able to control whether or not the phone is on or not, always, venture for off, because you don't want to start surgery on a patient when they're still wide awake if you can help it. That being said, we're going to flip the phone up to the charge port, and we're actually going to put on a third bit, which I was struggling to recall while I was describing them. This is, I believe, a P2, which stands for pentalobe size 2. So pentalobes, if you're not that good at your Latin prefixes, are 5-pointed bits. If I can get this guy into focus, I'd love to show you. So it's got 5 points on it. This is the largest size, but the P2 specifically is what we're going to be using for this. These screws are Kismet to these. So we're going to remove them. My screwdriver is magnetized. If you can get your hands on one, if you see yourself doing this again in the future, maybe even you're looking at this for a trial way, a little side hustle, definitely consider investing in that. Save yourself some time and energy. I definitely recommend the iFixit kit as well. It was my first and really only exposure to repair kits that are out there, but the amount of bits available, there's far more than what I actually am going to be using in today's repair, which is just 3 total. It has a wide array. If you're already in laptop and any kind of hardware swap in electronics, even if it's not even microelectronics, just regular electronics, definitely a worthy investment to get into. So we went ahead and we got the 2 pentalobe screws out the bottom. So now the only thing that's technically securing the screen down now is a piece. Well, actually, this is an 8 Plus. So in the 7 Plus, there's actually a hook here. It slides forward and then comes down and secures in. But this actually has just along the screen a bunch of little metal bits that will sit flush with it when you press down, and really the adhesive and the pentalobes are all that are doing the work, and there's no plastic piece like there had been with other models in the past from this model. Alright, so we got it in. It's cracked. Thankfully with my phone, it's not too badly cracked. I should be able to get it open just fine. But if you find yourself in that situation, tape. Make sure you use tape. A lot of suction cups struggle with tape if they are not lined up in the fashion that they're not sitting on a line. So imagine that I had tape on here and there's a line that you can see for where the tape starts and ends if I use 2 large pieces. That might compromise my suction, which is not really what we're looking for. Since we're pointing out things that I've forgotten, I also have a heat gun here. So at certain points, you're going to be messing with some very delicate components that, in my experience, cause ongoing issues if damaged, and they can be damaged relatively easily. It's hard to tell with your eye a lot of some of these ribbonings and cablings that you can damage. Now, that being said, don't be scared. As long as you're not, you know, going all mad ripper inside your phone and exerting excessive force on it, you shouldn't have any issues. That being said, though, there are some things that I'm going to point out that I've seen a lot of technicians that are rookies make right off the get-go, myself included, on a lot of these Plus models that are issues. This is my approach to repair. I take pride in my repair. I did not have an actual educated classroom environment learning, though technically I did, but it was a crash course to say the least, and that's a story for another time. So let's get into this guy. We're gonna grab a pick here. We got the pick. We're gonna get suction, and we're gonna try to lift so that we can hopefully breach the adhesive. If you find yourself struggling too much, all you got to do really is apply some moderate heat, but I'm stubborn, so I'm going to see if I can do this the way I used to without ever having to worry about stuff like that. So give me a second here to be prideful. Gosh. Remember, folks, the screen's already broken. Just don't yank the whole thing off with you, because that's definitely going to be a bad sign right off the bat. That's not a repair you want. It's not a repair I want to see you make after watching my video. Alright, so we're getting some separation on the frame, and just like that, I'm in. Now, with this particular model, the direction, the spot I specifically got a pick underneath, you have to be incredibly careful. I'm barely in this guy, just enough to get enough separation to actually get between the screen and the frame. I did a pretty thorough job, I can tell, because even after all this time since I've last repaired this device, and it has been a while, I had a hard time getting under it. Even more so than I did the last time. I remember it was a lot easier, a lot faster. Maybe I'm out of practice. But if you look here, maybe you can see if my camera's good enough. I've started to get separation. But if I go any further, there is a junction here with two cables. It's not an issue typically, but it's my God's honest answer that you don't ever want to press into this thing, because maybe one day you're fixing the screen, but the screen isn't broken. You're just trying to test a new one, or, you know, what have you. You don't want to damage the screen any further than necessary. Well, if you clip those ribbonings, it's done. There's no next lifetime in any sense for that screen. It's, you know, it's finished. So what I just did now was I slid between the frame and the screen to begin to break up the adhesive. And now that I'm in there and I've broken up enough of it, it's starting to become a lot easier. If it's giving you difficulty, it's probably still fresh adhesive somehow. Maybe it was very well taken care of. Maybe it was recently repaired by someone who took the time and energy to really get that next adhesive layer going down strong. What we're going to do now is we're going to come across the top. Keep in mind, my screen's already broken, so I'm not too worried about getting it off necessarily in one piece. I do want to try to and not damage the display, because if I have a defective part, which, you know, knock on wood, we don't have a defective part, we're going to go right in and swap this bad boy out. So we've broken up the adhesive, and we're now opening it up. 7 pluses and 8 pluses open up book style like this. I believe that's true with the regular 7s and 8s as well. And here we'll see some very important key components of the device, namely the battery. That's the big boy right there that we're going to be addressing. There is the Taptic engine, which controls the vibration and everything. We actually have a loose screw on the Taptic engine. Let me grab that bad boy. It's a Y-bit, so it's probably from the side of the phone. And I think I can see right here exactly where it's at. From here by the looks of it, or maybe here. I think my sister lost some of her screws somehow. The last time she beat it up, it had an opening in it one of the times I repaired this phone. There's a shield plating that is located here and up here as well, and then on the camera. We're only going to worry about 2 of these. This right here is the shield plating that's covering the front camera assembly, which controls the front camera, you know, for your selfie, get your selfie game on, which inadvertently also powers your proximity sensor. So when you answer a phone call and stick it to your ear, the screen will turn off so you don't mash buttons like crazy. If you find yourself in that situation where that is happening, debris may have entered through your ear speaker mesh right here and are blocking it, or it may have been damaged, or the part may be somehow failing. It also has the earpiece speaker as well, which I kind of hinted at when I was talking about the mesh. Those 3 components are all powered through this one flex display. So if you're having issues with any single one of those things, and trying swapping screens or anything like that hasn't been working for you, you can try replacing that actual physical speaker or that ribbon. Down here we have the connection for the battery and for the LCD and digitizer for the screen, as well as the charge port connection, I believe somewhere over here. This is a board right here. This is where all the sophisticated stuff is going to be going on in this device. And then this is mostly the charge port, and that's your loudspeaker right there. There's some microphones down here. Nope, you can't even see what I'm pointing at. Loudspeaker, charge port right here, microphone right here. So that being said, we're going to take care of this guy and this guy. These are all either Philips, if I remember correctly. These are Ys on 7 Plus models. These are regular Philips on 8 Plus. And up here, these are always going to be Y model screws. So we're going to take our old Philips 000 and we're going to start taking off the screws for the first shield plate. I did wash my hands first because your body does naturally create oils. Plus, we're living in the time of Miss Coronavirus, COVID-19. You need to wash your hands and you need to quarantine. At-risk people like myself do appreciate you. So that shield plate's now off, revealing all of these connections. I'm going to be honest, I can't remember all of these connections. I can tell you for a fact that this guy right here is going to be, and you got to be very careful when you're disconnecting these, because there's little nodes on here that you could damage, that will damage the board. So you always want to just be nimble with it. I have a certain confidence because I've been doing this for a while, and I'm actually, as I say that, going to backtrack because I'm not using my preferred piece. So there's the battery, and we can confirm that because of course it's connecting down to the battery. I believe this here is the charge, no, this is the charge port. I'm not sure what this guy is right here. This is either the display or the digitizer, but now that we've isolated the battery specifically first, because it's good practice, good basic housekeeping, and showing you love your phone to disconnect the power correctly the first time through. Now we're going to switch to our Y bit, Y000, and we're going to take off this next shield plate. All right, so this next shield plate is off, and we are going to go ahead and disconnect this device. So now we can, without the, aside from the adhesive of course, we can disconnect it. And we're now looking at the LCD. Now, depending on what part you may have purchased, you may find that you are missing this particular part here. What you're looking at, the silver and black, is actually a pre-installed shield plate which braces the back of the display and prevents it from having any internal damage, if you will, from a drop damaging the display. Now, if you don't have that part, you're going to have to transfer it. But before you do that, you're going to want to go ahead and actually wait and actually transfer over your other small parts first. You're not necessarily going to screw them down. Some of these will screw on top, Pretty much all these platings are going to screw on top, but you want to get your small parts in place. It's completely preference, so take that with a grain of salt. Mine's pre-installed, so I'm not going to do anything different. I'm just going to deinstall the parts that have to move over. What parts are those, Anthony? Good question. Let me tell you. So there's the ribbon flex, which has the camera and proximity sensor on it, of course the ear speaker, and there's a shield plate for it. There's also your home button, and there is a shield plating that covers that as well. It is Phillips up top for the camera assembly, and down for the home button, it is Y screws. So your Y 000's bottom, Phillips 000's on top. So there's your shield plate, underneath is the display, underneath that is your digitizer, underneath that is the plastic outer frame, underneath that, which would be the top of the screen, would be the glass to complete the structure. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and start removing parts. Some people would automatically take a moment to just go ahead and plug in the screen, and I guess you could do that, but I just don't prefer to at the end of the day, only because I'd rather have all of the hardware connected and powered on, just so I could have an accurate expectation of what's going to happen and troubleshoot from there if there is an issue. Maybe my part's defective, I could try another part or just put my part back on, see if anything changes. But, you know, I believe if you do the job slow, thorough, and cautious, that it shouldn't be any issue aside from having a defective part that you're putting on that would cause any issues going forward. So that being said, we're going to remove those shield plates. So I'm going to go ahead and shift this to the side to get that done. So you can have a little bird's eye view of that. I still have my Y 000, so I'm going to start with the shield plate on the home button. And here very quickly we're arriving at the first pitfall. If you somehow damage this device, specifically the home button, do not be surprised that your home button will immediately disappear for Touch ID specifically, your fingerprint, Apple Pay, all that fun stuff. It's because this chip here underneath has a specific serialization to it that is coded to your A processor. That A processor is located somewhere underneath here. If it doesn't recognize it after you've swapped it out for a new one, which you can do, it's just going to lock it out. There are aftermarket alternatives. None of them work as good as the real thing. There are actually now, and according to my recent research, some pretty good options that are narrowly the same, but they are still not the same because they rely on backdoor software and also a combination of Bluetooth to allow it to work. And your home button will physically click instead of pretending to click, which the 7 Plus and 8 Plus are known for because of the Taptic engine. In order to accomplish making this phone with the waterproof rating that it had, they had to seal the home button. It was the biggest point of vulnerability. So they said, screw it, it's not going to be a real button anymore. It's going to be this haptic button, and it's going to vibrate when you press it. It's going to feel real because we put this big old vibrating motor over here in the bottom left of the screen in to, you know, give you that illusion of the experience. I don't know why. Personally, I could care less. I missed the clicking of an actual button, like actual hardware to give me some kind of feedback, but I just missed the home button, period. That's why I haven't upgraded. And that's why I'm barely upgrading now to the 2nd Gen SE2, which I have already pre-ordered. So, that being said, we're going to switch back to our Phillips head 000. And we are going to go ahead and remove the second shield plating, which is for our front camera assembly. I'm like hyper aware of every noise now because I don't have any music or anything playing. I'm usually listening to music while I'm fixing stuff. It sounds bad, but I'm actually not really applying any heavy pressure to this guy. He's just being dramatic. So I'm actually going to back off him and move on to this one to get him out just fine. And I'm just going to lift this guy out because that screw is not keeping him down anymore. Now be careful when you are taking the shield plate off, because sometimes the camera gets snagged in there and you pull thinking there's not anything that's going to resist, and you end up tearing your front camera ribbon. Alright, so now we have the ear speaker, which we can actually safely at this point remove, and the ribboning. So here are the two most vulnerable points on the Plus model iPhones. And honestly, for the 7s and 8s as well, this is still a threat. People ruin these home buttons quite frequently, unfortunately, especially if they're new to the repair game. So specifically, we're gonna take out our handy dandy heat gun, and we're gonna apply about, well, it depends on your heat gun. You want it to feel somewhat hot. Almost to the point where it's slightly uncomfortable, but maybe not quite as much. I guess it's kind of really hard because pain is objective to everybody, but you want some moderate heat on that guy. So you're gonna take your screen, and in the sweeping motion to evenly distribute the heat, you are gonna go ahead and start heating up the bottom portion. Now, what we're doing now is there's actually adhesive, clear adhesive, that keeps it attached to the frame of the screen. And we want to heat it up to essentially neutralize it. And for whatever portion that doesn't fully neutralize, we're going to use the isopropyl alcohol to get in there. Oh, wow, yikes. That was just a hair more than I wanted to go, but good enough. So now we're going to go ahead and disconnect it. I usually grab 2 spudgers to do this because, again, very awkward hands. And I'm going to place a spudger down here where it junctions into the screen. So this is actually a connection. So the part above right here that I'm not covering, so the silver, the black above the silver, and my black spudger's on right now, that's actually the ribboning it connects to it and folds over on in order to feed all of the feedback through to these ribbonings here for what the home button is doing. So very gingerly, I'm going to rest this to keep it firmly in place, and I'm going to grab my opener and I'm going to unclip it, trying very hard not to damage it in the process. And now that that's freed up, we're going to go. The reason why I chose to do this right now of all times is because I did heat it a little bit more than I preferred to. I also typically don't even take it in this order. I usually have it already disconnected. If you can look, because I've repaired this phone before, it's far easier, plus the heat, to get underneath this adhesive. Now that I have it a little bit breached, I'm going to show you a little trick that I learned through my time. I'm going to drop just a little bit of isopropyl alcohol. This is the 91% I'm using on that spudger, and I'm just going to kind of work it a little bit, and just like that. Oop, I'm not even putting moderate force, and it already fell through. For those of you that didn't quite catch it and are not going to be rewinding to see that again, the home buttons actually don't sit from the bottom to the top. They slide in from the top. They have usually a rubber gasket in place between the bottom of the home button and the top of the screen to get a good seal, but mine literally broke and came off the phone this morning for no reason while I was at work. So yeah, there's usually that O-ring gasket. It's black, it's very small around the edges. You want to make sure that stays relatively lined up and that it sits flatly exactly how it's supposed to, because they will pop up if they're not properly installed. This phone's been repaired so many times, and it had been such a long time since it was last repaired, I can't even say why, and who knows why it did for me today of all days as I was getting ready to fix this. So now we're going to go ahead and take off the proximity sensor and the rear camera assembly, and these are the pin connections right here, the copper connections that the pins rest on for the ear speaker that actually provided the power to operate. We're going to apply heat here as well. It's really important to note that you have to use only plastic tools. It's not necessarily a required must, but with this model, there's a ribboning, there's a fold in the ribboning here that has contacts that need to remain grounded on the bottom side here that have like a weird black sticker patch on it. And if you somehow cause it to lose grounding, it will usually kill from the bottom up, which depending on where it shorts out specifically might cut off the front camera altogether, and or the proximity sensor. So you'll either have your selfies working, but every time you go to answer a call, you can't like actually hold it to your ear because you'll be pushing buttons all the time, or both. I've never seen it like fully short everything out. When it does that, usually the phone will restart and it'll boot loop. So if you've had it repaired before and it was a cheap little screen repair, most likely some liquid got through here on the ear speaker because they use a cheap part that doesn't really keep liquid out very well, and it went straight through and touched those connectors and ungrounded it and shorted the part out, and the whole part failed and it boot loops. I've seen that before plenty of times in my day. So I'm going to apply heat, and then I'm going to start working on it, and I'm going to use isopropyl. In this case, it's fine because there's no real risk of losing it and grounding on it because it's still isopropyl alcohol and there's no power running through it specifically. That's where liquid isopropyl becomes a real risk. So if you let it dry, no harm done. Just make sure that you take a good look at the sticker if it's still on here, because I can't recall whether she had had it previously repaired somewhere else or not. So I don't know if that sticker is going to be on here. So yeah, that's right about where I want it. So I'm going to grab my good old spudger here again, and I'm going to be very careful, because if you pay attention, there's actually two pieces, and they have their own individual portions of ribboning that will allow them to independently move. One is a proximity sensor, and one I believe is an ambient light sensor. I didn't mention it before because essentially it accomplishes really hand in hand the same thing at the end of the day. It's not a big deal in my opinion. Alright, so now we're going to start working the ribboning off very slowly. Don't be too proud. If you feel it already giving you too much resistance, like doesn't feel comfortable, you don't like exerting that much force right where you're exerting it, you can cheat with a little isopropyl alcohol, or you could just use more heat. There's no issues with that at all. All right, so we almost have the part off here. Beautiful. And there it is. So if you look, I've actually removed it intact. So you can see by the weird glitter, or glint I should say, next to my thumb, that's a patch. It's basically a black sticker that's covering copper, I'm assuming copper junctions on there, but it's definitely a metallic substance that current runs through that allows this thing to operate properly. Make sure you cover that back up, because sometimes it'll stick and it'll stay right here, and it's there for a reason. Heat it back up, drop some ice, so whatever you got to do to pick it back up and stick it back on. Just make sure it's fully dried before you do anything with it in terms of power. And my work phone is running low on power, so really that's going to be just about it for this video. I took way longer because I wanted to explain some stuff that I feel is beneficial to anybody, whether they're a first timer or they're going to be doing this as a side hustle. It's a good intro. This device is very fun to swap hardware on. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way through. If you're listening to this, if you somehow just skipped and are for some reason skipping right to this moment, you are a cruel person, an unusual person, but thank you for watching anyways. At this point, all you have to do is transfer it. So you're working backwards from here. You're going to put your component for your front camera assembly down, put your heart speaker back in, cover it with the shield bracket. Same goes for the home button, screw it all back down. That is unless, of course, you needed to swap your shield plate on your particular part, in which case all you would do before that is remove these. These have Y screws on them. Some are missing because of the fall damage over time, which does happen. Sometimes there's loose screws inside of them. And then you're going to put the plate on your new part if it didn't come with it, screw it down, and then you're going to go ahead and put your small parts on. And then from there, you're going to plug it back in, reconnect your battery, and assuming everything is still connected but not fully closed, you're going to boot your phone back on and just start testing it. Look for dead spots. I like to open up Snapchat, take a snap, and start swiping around and making sure I can touch every single point. And then I'm also going to test by making a test call and covering the proximity sensor, that the proximity sensor still functions, open up the cameras, test that too, make sure that's all good to go, and of course your home button. Sometimes if you have a defective screen, the Touch ID will immediately not work, but also sometimes you screwed up. So you definitely, if you are having that issue and you don't have a backup part, immediately put your old screen back on, see if the Touch ID is working fine with your home button. If neither of those are working, even with the original screen back on, you may have damaged your part. So thank you for watching, guys. I hope you appreciate this. It was fun for me to talk about this stuff. It's been a minute since I've been able to nerd out on this kind of stuff for a while. So hopefully you're having a great day. Hopefully you're in a safe, maybe even corona-free world. Who knows? But either way, I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.